Tonight, if your mind is too busy to rest, you're not alone. If the day is still moving inside your thoughts, you don't have to fight it. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to replay anything perfectly. Tonight, you can let all of that wait. You can set it down gently, like a heavy coat at the end of a long day. And while your body stays right where it is, we're going to drift very far away in your imagination. Far from bright rooms and electric light, far from screens and schedules, far from the quick, noisy rhythm of modern life. We're going to a winter night over 1,000 years ago, a night in the north, a night shaped by snow, wind, darkness, and patience. Welcome to transcendent history. This is bedtime history. History for sleep. A slow, gentle sleep story history designed to soften your thoughts. A calm, unhurried story told quietly so you can rest. In this episode, we're going to do something very simple and very slow. We're going to spend the night inside a Viking Longhouse and explore how Vikings stayed warm during Viking winter nights when the world outside was frozen and dark. Nothing dramatic happens here. There are no raids, no battles, no storms at sea, no heroes in shining stories, just ordinary Viking daily life and the quiet methods people used again and again to stay warm enough to sleep. We'll walk through the longhouse as if we're there. We'll notice the roof heavy with turf and snow. We'll listen to the Viking fire hearth crackle low in the center. We'll understand the small practical choices. Thick walls, narrow doors, raised sleeping benches, wool layers, shared warmth that made sleeping in a Viking longhouse possible. So if you like boring history for sleep, told softly, with a calm, steady rhythm, you can close your eyes now. And as you breathe in, and breathe out, we'll step into the night together. Outside, it's cold in a way that feels serious. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill your skin. It changes the world. It stiffens wood. It hardens the ground. It makes water heavy and slow. The wind has been moving across the snow for hours. Not rushing, not screaming, just steady, persistent. Like something that has all the time in the world. And the snow, soft and endless, keeps falling in its quiet way, covering footprints almost as soon as they're made, smoothing out sharp edges, muting sound, turning the landscape into a simple palette of dark shapes and pale, drifted light. Somewhere in that cold, a village sits low against the earth, not grand, not proud, just practical, built to survive. A few structures dark against the snow, fences, storage sheds, and one long, heavy building that seems to anchor everything around it. A Viking Longhouse, a place where people eat, work, talk, argue, laugh, and sleep. A place where the winter is kept outside as much as possible. You walk toward it now, slowly, as if you're not in a hurry, as if time moves differently here. The wind pushes at your clothing. It tries to find gaps at your wrists, your neck, your sleeves. And you understand quickly that cold is not just the air. Cold is something that looks for a way in. Ahead, the longhouse roof looks heavy, as if it's wearing the season. Its shape is long and low. There are no bright windows, no cheerful lamps, only a faint orange hint of firelight leaking softly around the edges of a wooden door. The closer you get, the more you notice the way the building sits. It doesn't stand tall like it's trying to challenge the sky. It crouches. It settles into the ground, as if it understands the wind and chooses not to fight it. You reach the door. It's thick, rough, worn smooth in places where hands have pushed and pulled it for years. The kind of door that has been opened in storms, in rain, in darkness, in snow. And when it opens, the first thing that hits you is not heat. Not the way a modern heater blasts warm air. Not the way a bright room feels like comfort. It's something subtler. A contrast. A difference. Outside was sharp, cold, and empty sound. Inside is thicker, muffled, lived in. The air smells of smoke and wool, of old wood that has been warmed and cooled 1,000 times, of damp clothing drying somewhere nearby, and underneath it all, the quiet presence of people. Not loud people, not busy people, but people who have settled into the night. You step inside, and the door closes behind you with a heavy final sound, like a boundary being drawn. Outside stays outside. Inside becomes its own world. Your eyes adjust slowly. The longhouse is dim, not brightly lit. Light doesn't fill every corner. It pools. It gathers near the center, and then it fades into shadow along the edges. And in the very center of the building is the heart of it all, the Viking fire hearth. A shallow rectangular pit where embers glow low. Small flames rise and fall, licking at blackened wood. The fire is not wild, not roaring. It is controlled, careful, the kind of fire you keep when you understand winter. This is not a place where you waste wood. Wood is work. Wood is time. Wood is survival. So the fire is managed like something precious. Near the hearth, stones are arranged and rearranged over many nights. They sit close enough to drink in heat, and later, when the flames sink low, they will release warmth slowly, quietly, as the night goes on. No one here calls it thermal mass. No one speaks of heat retention. But everyone understands it. They know which bench is warmer, which spot stays less harsh after midnight, which stones hold heat a little longer. The longhouse itself is long and open. There are posts, thick wooden supports, running down the length of the space, holding up the roof. Between those posts are shadows, and in those shadows you can sense stored life. Bundles, tools, hanging garments, supplies, food. Up above, the roof feels low and heavy. Thick beams cross overhead, supporting layers of wood, brush, turf. And now, in winter, snow. Each layer does a quiet job. The wood holds shape. The turf blocks wind. The snow muffles sound and adds another blanket against the sky. There is no modern chimney. Smoke rises and lingers, then slowly finds its way out through gaps near the ridge of the roof or a simple opening designed to let it escape. To a modern visitor, it might sting the eyes, it might feel uncomfortable, but for the people who lived here, a little smoke was a trade they accepted. Because smoke that lingers also means warmth that lingers. And warmth in a Viking winter is worth almost everything. In the center, near the fire, the floor is packed earth. It's slightly uneven, polished by years of footsteps. Ash has been swept aside and spread thinly, a pale record of many fires and many meals. And along both long walls, running the length of the building, raised platforms, wooden benches. These are the sleeping spaces. These are the foundation of Viking sleeping arrangements. They aren't private bedrooms. There are no separate rooms for each person. There are no doors you can close for silence. The Longhouse is shared life, shared warmth, shared air, shared sound. But there is a reason the benches are raised. Cold air sinks. It pools along the floor. It creeps low like a slow tide. So you sleep higher. Not high like a second story, just high enough that you aren't lying in the coldest air. On the benches you can see layers, straw or dried rushes spread across the wood, a rough mattress that can be replaced when it becomes too dirty. Over the straw, wool blankets, thick and coarse, and sometimes animal skins, sheepskin, perhaps reindeer hide. Soft fur turned inward, tougher hide turned outward. These are Viking beds in winter, simple, practical, warm in the way that matters most, layered. People are already lying there, some curled on their sides, wrapped tightly. Others lying on their backs, arms folded, caps pulled low over ears to keep heat from escaping. Children are gathered toward the warmer areas, tucked between adults like small bundles of breath and cloth. Elders lie where warmth is steady, and where the bench feels familiar. In the coldest months, no space is wasted. If there is a gap between sleepers, someone may drift into it in the night, not even fully waking, just instinctively seeking warmth. Body heat is not a romantic idea here. It is a practical one. It is part of how Vikings stayed warm sleeping in longhouses. Another quiet resource. Another kind of fuel. Near the fire, someone moves slowly. Not hurried, not loud, just practical. They take a stick and nudge embers together. They shift a log to the edge so it catches slowly. They are not trying to make the longhouse bright. They are trying to make the fire last. Some coals are drawn aside, buried carefully under ash, because ash insulates, because ash can protect heat. Because in the morning, when everything is cold and stiff, a living ember saved from the night means the difference between struggle and routine. No one wants to wake to a dead hearth. No one wants to start again from nothing with numb fingers and frozen air. So the fire is planned for, even while people sleep. This is the rhythm of Viking home life. Not glamorous, not loud, but steady, repeated, and somehow calming because it makes the night feel manageable. If you look around the longhouse, you might notice hanging garments near the warmth, cloaks, tunics, cloth wraps, damp clothing drying slowly in the rising heat. Their presence does more than dry fabric. They also break drafts, soften air movement, and create small pockets of warmth along the edges of the room. In some places, you might see simple curtains, woven cloth or stitched skins, pulled across part of a sleeping bench, not for luxury, not for decoration, but to interrupt the movement of cold air, to hold in warmth close to bodies, to create a small sheltered space within the larger space. A curtain can't stop winter, but it can change the way winter touches you. And in the deepest part of the night, that small difference can feel very large. The Longhouse is not silent, but it is quiet in a particular way. A winter quiet, the kind of quiet where small sounds become noticeable. A slow crackle from the hearth, a gentle shift of straw, a breath, a distant animal sound. Toward the far end of the building, away from the central hearth, you hear the soft presence of animals at rest. A cow shifting weight, a sheep breathing steady and slow. A horse stamping once, then settling. In many communities, animals were kept close in winter, sometimes in an attached section, sometimes under the same roof, sometimes just near enough that their body heat mattered. They were part of the household economy, part of the food supply, part of the work of the year. And in the cold season, they were also part of the warmth of the Longhouse. Their bodies release heat constantly, quietly, the same way humans do, the same way the fire does. And when you are trying to survive a long winter, you don't ignore any source of warmth. So in a Viking winter routine, the Longhouse becomes more than a home. It becomes a shared shelter, a small ecosystem where people, animals, fire, wool, stone, ash, and wood are all pieces of the same quiet solution to the same quiet problem: how to stay warm enough to sleep. And as you listen, you may notice your own body responding, shoulders softening, jaw unclenching, breathing deepening, thoughts slowing just slightly, as if your mind is beginning to trust the pace of the story. You don't have to concentrate. You don't have to remember every detail. You can let the words pass like gentle snow, falling, settling, becoming part of the quiet background. Because this is a slow history podcast style of telling. This is calm history narration. This is sleep aid storytelling. And if your mind begins to drift away, that is not a mistake. That is the goal. Now, let's stay near the hearth for a little while longer, because the Viking fire hearth is the center of everything. Without it, the Longhouse is just a wooden shell. With it, the Longhouse becomes livable. The fire is kept low on purpose. A roaring blaze would waste fuel. It would burn too quickly. It would demand constant attention. But a low fire, a bed of embers, a slow catching log, a careful arrangement of coals and ash can last through the night with minimal tending. Someone who lives here learns to read the fire, not like a scientist, like someone who depends on it. They know what kind of wood burns fast, what kind burns slow, what kind creates more smoke, what kind creates more coals. They know when to add a log and when not to. They know how to place it at the edge so it catches gradually, feeding the hearth over time. They know that ash, when spread in a certain way, can insulate embers, keeping them alive longer. And they know that stones, once heated, will keep giving warmth, even when the flames sink low. These are not heroic skills, they are household skills, the kind of knowledge that becomes part of ordinary Viking daily life, not written in great sagas, but lived in quiet repetition. If you picture the fire now, you can imagine its sound. Not loud, just a steady crackle, a soft pop, the occasional settling of wood. These are the crackling fire sounds that fill the longhouse, the way silence fills a modern room. And in the calm, the firelight paints everything with slow movement. It makes shadows breathe on the walls. It makes hanging cloth sway slightly. It makes the roof beams appear and disappear as your eyes blink in the dimness. A longhouse at night is not bright. It is warm enough, lit enough, and quiet enough. Now let's talk slowly about the building itself, because the Viking Longhouse is not just a place people happen to live. It is shaped by winter, shaped by wind, shaped by the need to keep warmth from escaping too quickly. The walls are thick. In some places, timber frames are packed with materials, wattle and daub, woven branches plastered with clay and straw, or turf and earth stacked in layers, or moss stuffed into gaps. Not because it looks nice, but because drafts are the enemy. A draft is not dramatic, it's quiet. It sneaks in under doors, through cracks in wood, around imperfect joins. And over hours, it steals warmth. So the longhouse is designed to lose heat slowly, not quickly, not sealed like a modern insulated house, but managed, resistant, stubborn. The roof sits low and heavy, not to impress anyone. Not to show wealth, but because warm air rises. And if you build a ceiling too high, your warmth rises out of reach. It gathers where no one can use it. The roof is kept lower. The space is long, not tall. A practical choice that makes a real difference. And the roof layers matter. Wood and brush provide structure. Turf adds insulation, and in winter, snow piles on top, forming another soft barrier against the wind. Snow, from a distance, looks like pure cold, but snow can also be a blanket. It fills gaps, it muffles sound, it creates stillness, and stillness helps warmth stay. You might notice that after a heavy snowfall, the longhouse sometimes feels quieter inside, less touched by the sharp edge of wind, as if the whole building has been wrapped in a thick white hush. No one here calls it insulation. They simply notice that it helps, and in a Viking winter, anything that helps becomes part of routine. The door is narrow. A narrow door means less heat escapes when it opens. It also means wind has less of a path to rush in. And often, the door is positioned so it doesn't face the worst wind directly. Small decisions, practical choices, repeated across many Viking houses because they work. Now, as we remain inside, the longhouse begins to feel more familiar. Not modern, not clean in a modern sense, but familiar in the way shared shelter can feel familiar. The air is smoky but steady. The warmth is gentle but present. The room is dim but safe. And the benches along the wall, the sleeping benches, are waiting like quiet shorelines. This is where the night truly happens. Not in dramatic conversations, not in loud events, but in breathing, in stillness, in the slow passing of time. In a world without clocks, Night is measured differently, by the cooling of stones, by the sinking of embers into ash, by the way the longhouse grows quieter as people settle deeper into sleep. And if you are listening to this as a 2-hour sleep story, you don't have to measure anything at all. You can let time dissolve, let the story become a soft background, let your mind float. Now imagine you move toward one of the benches, not hurried, just slowly, as if you are careful not to wake anyone. The straw shifts quietly under your hand as you touch it. It's not soft like a modern mattress, but it has It holds warmth, and the wool blankets on top, coarse but thick, feel like the kind of fabric that has done hard work. You sit. The bench creaks gently, not loud, just the sound of wood being wood. And then, as you lie down, you understand something important about Viking Longhouse warmth. It is not a perfect comfort. It is not luxury. It is a careful balance. Warm enough, safe enough, protected enough. If you're close enough to the fire, you feel the faint reach of heat. Not strong, just present. And if you're farther, you rely more on wool, skins, and shared warmth. People shift sometimes in the night to find better warmth. A shoulder turns toward the hearth. A blanket is pulled higher. A child's feet are tucked closer to an adult. No one makes a big deal of it. It's instinct. It's part of Viking winter routine, part of how Vikings survived the cold. Now, if you look again at the hearth, you can see how it has been arranged. Not just wood thrown in, but thoughtfully placed. A log near the edge, a mound of embers, a thin layer of ash in certain spots, maybe even a small hollow where coals have been buried. This is how they managed embers overnight, by planning, by habit, by understanding that the night is long. And in that knowledge, there is something calming. Because the longhouse is not fighting the night. It's cooperating with it. It's accepting the winter and working around it. Now, listen to the longhouse sounds again. The fire, quiet. The breathing, steady. The animals, soft. The storm outside, distant. This is a winter bedtime story for adults that asks nothing from you. A cozy winter history that is gentle, not exciting. A cold night sleep story that stays calm. And if you're still awake, that's fine. You don't need to force sleep. You can just be here. Let the story keep you company. In the longhouse, people didn't always expect perfect, unbroken sleep. They might wake briefly, shift position, check the fire, then settle back down. That was normal. It wasn't anxiety. It wasn't failure. It was just the shape of night. So if you drift in and out of wakefulness, you can let it happen without judgment. You can be gentle with yourself. Now, let's move through the longhouse slowly, like you're walking quietly with bare feet on packed earth. You pass a post worn smooth by many hands. You pass hanging tools that will be used again in daylight. You pass bundles of stored food kept dry and safe. Up in the rafters, you might see herbs dried from summer, the memory of a warmer season hanging above a winter night. You might see strips of cured meat, smoke darkened, waiting patiently. The longhouse holds time in layers, the work of summer, the storage of autumn, the endurance of winter, and all of it funnels toward this moment. People lying down in darkness, trying to stay warm enough to sleep. That is what this story is about. That is what how Vikings stayed warm really means. Not a single secret trick, but many small, quiet strategies. Thick walls, low roofs, shared benches, wool layers, fire managed with ash, animals kept close, narrow doors, drafts blocked, warmth stretched through time. Now, as your mind listens, you may begin to feel the rhythm of repetition, because repetition is soothing. Repetition tells your nervous system nothing dangerous is happening, nothing urgent is required. So we'll let some repetition happen naturally now. We'll return to simple details, the kind you can hold lightly or let go of entirely. The fire glows. The fire crackles. The stones hold warmth. The ash protects embers. The roof holds snow. The walls hold back wind. The benches hold bodies. The wool holds heat. The longhouse holds night. And you are held too. Outside, the snow continues its slow, patient fall. It settles on the roof. It fills small gaps. It adds another thin layer of quiet insulation, another soft barrier between inside warmth and the frozen silence above. Inside, cold air still exists, of course. It is not magically gone, but it is managed on it, kept low, kept moving slowly. You might even feel a faint draft near the floor, a gentle reminder that winter is still present. That is why the benches are raised, why people sleep off the ground, why straw and wool matter. And if you imagine yourself tucked into those layers, wool, fur, blanket upon blanket, you can almost feel the way warmth becomes a pocket around your body. Not warm like summer, warm like survival, warm like enough. The longhouse doesn't promise perfect comfort. It promises shelter. It promises that the wind will be muffled, that the snow will not touch your skin, that the cold will have to work harder to reach you. And in winter, making cold work harder is its own kind of victory. Now, let's settle deeper into the heart of Viking home life, because the longhouse is not just architecture. It is a social space, a family space, a working space, a sleeping space. People share air, they share warmth, they share sound. Privacy is different here. It's not built with walls, it's created with habit, with respectful quiet, with turning slightly away, with pulling a curtain, with lowering your voice. And at night, the longhouse becomes a single organism, many bodies, one room, one fire, many blankets, one roof, one winter. If you listen carefully, not sharply, just gently, you can hear the rhythm of sleeping bodies, breathing, a soft sigh, a shift of straw, the faint sound of wool rubbing against wool. A child murmurs briefly, then falls quiet again. An adult adjusts a blanket without fully waking. Someone's cap slips, then is pulled back down over an ear. This is the soft motion of Viking Longhouse winter nights, Not exciting, not cinematic, just real, just human. And that is why it can feel soothing. Because it reminds you that sleep is not something you have to achieve perfectly. Sleep is something people drift into in imperfect places, through imperfect nights, with small awakenings and small returns. Now, let's return to the fire again, because it is still there, still working, and because the sound of fire is one of the oldest calming sounds in the world. The embers glow like small pieces of sunset. The flames rise, then soften. A log shifts slightly, settling into a better position. A tiny shower of sparks lifts, then disappears before reaching the rafters. Ash drifts down slowly, joining the layers already on the floor. A quiet record of many nights just like this one. And if your mind tries to wander back to your own day, back to your worries, your lists, your conversations, you can gently place those thoughts outside the longhouse door just for now. Imagine setting them beside the boots and cloaks near the entrance. They will still be there in the morning. They won't disappear. They'll wait. But you don't have to carry them inside the longhouse. Inside, you are allowed to rest. Now, we'll begin to move, very slowly, toward the deeper explanations of how the longhouse kept warmth. Not in a sharp academic way, but in a calm, mildly educational way. The kind of calm educational content that feels like a soft lamp in your mind. The longhouse keeps warmth through three main ideas: keeping heat sources inside, slowing heat loss, and stacking layers of insulation, both physical and social. The heat source is the hearth. It's central, so warmth can spread. It's low, so it lasts. It's managed with ash, so embers survive, and it's paired with stones, so heat lingers after flame fades. Heat loss is slowed by thick walls, turf roofs, and draft blocking. The roof is low, so warm air stays within reach. The door is narrow so the wind doesn't rush in easily, and smoke exits slowly because sealing everything would trap too much smoke. Insulation comes from materials: turf, moss, straw, wool, skins, and from bodies sharing space. In winter, people and animals become part of the environment, adding warmth just by being alive. These are not fancy solutions, they are quiet solutions. But they worked well enough. Night after night, winter after winter. And here, in this imagined longhouse, you can feel how those solutions shape the night. The room is not warm like summer, but it is warm enough that sleep is possible. And sometimes possible is all you need. Now, let's sit with that thought for a moment, not forcing it, just letting it rest. Warm enough, safe enough, quiet enough. If sleep comes now, it's welcome. If it comes later, it's still welcome. There is no deadline, no pressure. The longhouse does not demand that you sleep immediately. It simply continues its steady work. Fire crackling, stones warming, wool holding heat, while the storm stays outside. And as the story continues, you can continue to soften. You can let the edges of your thoughts blur. You can allow your attention to drift in and out, the way a flame rises and falls. because this is a relaxing voice for sleep kind of story, a soft spoken history designed to make your mind less sharp. A 2 hours bedtime history journey where nothing surprises you, nothing shocks you, nothing pulls you awake. Only winter, only warmth, only quiet. Now, let's notice one more sensory contrast, because the contrast is part of what makes the Longhouse feel safe. Outside, wind. Inside, muffled air. Outside, sharp cold. Inside, thick smoke, soft warmth. Outside, emptiness. Inside, breath and life. Outside, snow falling. Inside, fire of flickering. The Longhouse is a boundary between two worlds. And tonight, you get to remain on the gentler side of that boundary. Now, as we continue, we'll move deeper into the Longhouse night, and we'll take our time. We'll keep returning to simple details. We'll keep the tone calm. We'll let repetition do its soothing work. So for now, just listen. Or don't. Just let the words be present like distant voices in another corner of the room, not meant for you, not requiring any answer. The embers glow. The fire crackles softly. The stones hold warmth. The roof holds snow. The benches hold sleepers. The wool holds heat. The Longhouse holds the night. And you can be held too as you drift a little farther away. The Longhouse holds the night. You can be held too as you drift a little farther without rushing. Let's let the scene widen just slightly so you can feel the whole room again, the shape of it, the quiet logic of it, and the way Viking houses were built for a season like this. Because a Viking longhouse in winter is not just a building, it's a strategy, a slow, patient answer to a repeating question. How do you stay warm enough? How do you stay fed enough? How do you stay rested enough to make it through the cold? If you listen carefully, you may notice that the room does not feel still, not truly still. It breathes. The fire breathes. The people breathe. The animals breathe. Even the walls seem to breathe as the wind presses and releases outside. And in that steady breathing, you begin to understand something simple. The longhouse isn't meant to defeat winter. It's meant to reduce winter, to shrink it down. until it becomes something you can live beside. Outside, winter is endless. Inside, winter is contained, not eliminated, just contained. Now, let's return to the center, to the fire, to the hearth. Because if you understand the hearth, you understand the heart of Viking home life. The Viking fire hearth sits in the center like a small, controlled sun. Not bright enough to turn night into day, but bright enough to mark the room with warmth and safety. In many longhouses, there's no chimney as you would picture it today. Smoke rises and lingers beneath the roofline. It doesn't vanish quickly. It takes its time. It moves lazily upward, spreads out, then seeps out through vents, gaps, or a simple opening near the ridge. That smoke is not just an inconvenience. It becomes part of the longhouse environment. The scent sinks into everything: hair, wool, wood, straw. To you, from the modern world, it might feel strange, like a room that needs to be aired out. But for the people here, it's normal. It signals warmth. It signals cooking. It signals that the hearth is alive. And there are benefits too, in a quiet way. Smoke can discourage insects. It can help preserve food when meat is hung in the rafters. It can dry materials. It can add a kind of protective haze to the space, like a thin curtain between inside and outside. The fire itself is not tended with excitement. It's tended with routine. Someone who lives in a Viking winter learns to treat fire like a resource to be managed, not wasted, not ignored, but watched the way you might watch the weather. They know when to feed it and when to let it calm down. They know that the best overnight warmth often comes from embers, not flames. Flames are lively but quick. Embers are quiet but lasting. So late at night, when most people have settled into their Viking sleeping arrangements, the work of the hearth becomes subtle. A hand moves wood to the edge. A stick nudges coals into a tighter mound. Ash is swept with care, not to clean, but to control. Ash is useful. Ash is patient. Ash holds heat. If you bury an ember under ash, it can survive longer, protected from too much oxygen, protected from sudden cooling. In the morning, someone will come and uncover it. They will blow softly, they will add dry kindling, and flame will return, not from nothing, but from a saved core. This is a quiet truth about how Vikings survived the cold. They didn't start over every day if they could avoid it. They carried warmth forward. They preserved heat the way they preserved food. Now, notice the stones near the hearth again. Some are placed close enough to absorb heat. Others form a rough boundary, a subtle shape that keeps the hearth defined, keeps feet from wandering too close in the dark. Stones hold warmth in a slow way. They warm gradually, then cool gradually. And in a Viking longhouse, winter nights kind of world, gradual is everything. A sudden burst of heat is not as helpful as steady, lasting warmth. Steady warmth gives you a chance to sleep. Steady warmth gives you a chance to dream. Now, as you listen to the fire, you might hear something else. The tiny, occasional sound of wood settling, a soft crack, a faint pop, a slow shifting. These are the crackling fire sounds that turn into a kind of lullaby, not a performance, just a natural rhythm. If you were recording this as no music sleep story, you could let the fireplace ambience sit under everything, the gentle, constant presence of a living hearth. And now, without hurrying, let's move from the hearth outward to the structure of the building itself, because the longhouse is designed like a warm container, a shelter that slows the loss of heat. The walls are not thin boards like modern interior walls. They are thick and layered, sometimes timber and planks, sometimes packed earth and turf, sometimes wattle and daub, woven branches plastered with clay and straw. And the gaps, those small spaces where cold air tries to slip through, are filled with whatever works: moss, grasses, fibers, bits of turf. It isn't pretty in a modern sense, but it's effective. This is Viking daily life engineering. Simple materials used intelligently. The roof matters most of all. A roof can be a liability in winter, or it can be a shield. Here, the roof is built thick, wood, then brush, then turf, and in winter, snow settles on top, a heavy, quiet layer that can actually help keep the warmth in. Snow, in a strange way, becomes part of the insulation. It fills the smallest spaces. It blocks the wind. It muffles sound. It turns the roof into a blanket. And you can feel that muffling even now, because outside the storm is still there, but it sounds far away, soft, like it's happening in another world. The longhouse does not erase winter, it simply makes winter distant. You may notice the way the ceiling feels low. Not cramped, exactly. Just lower than you'd expect in a grand hall story. Because this is not a hall built for drama. It's a home built for living. Warm air rises, so you keep your roof lower so that warmth stays closer to bodies. You don't give heat too much space to disappear into. The entrances are often narrow, sometimes built with a small passage or windbreak. Not always, not everywhere, but the idea appears again and again. Control the drafts, control the wind, control how much warmth escapes. Because the most dangerous cold is often the cold you don't notice right away, the slow creeping draft that steals warmth over hours. Now, let's return to the benches again, because we're moving deeper into the real center of this story. How Vikings stayed warm sleeping in longhouses. The benches run along the long walls. They create a kind of shoreline for the room. In the center, hearth, movement, shared space. Along the edges, rest, blankets, bodies, quiet. A bench is raised for a reason. Cold air sinks, so you sleep above it. Not high, just enough. And you build layers under you: straw, rushes, dried grasses. This straw base has its own quiet warmth. It holds air, and trapped air is insulation. Even without modern terms, people learn what works. They learn what feels warmer. They learn what keeps the cold from biting up through wood. Then come the blankets. Wool is the hero of many winters. Wool keeps warmth even when damp. Wool traps air. Wool lasts. So Viking clothing and Viking beds often share the same material truth. Layers of wool are protection. Over wool, animal skins add another layer. Fur inward for softness and warmth. Hide outward for wind resistance. Skins can be heavy, but heavy is good in winter. Heavy presses warmth closer to the body, the way a weighted blanket can feel calming. And then there's the biggest warmth source beyond the hearth: other people. This is not always talked about clearly in romantic stories, but in a cold climate, shared sleeping is practical. Families sleep close, workers sleep close, guests may be given space, but not too much, because too much space is too much cold. Viking sleeping arrangements become a kind of warmth-sharing system. Children are tucked near the center of warmth. Elders are protected. Body heat is distributed naturally, not with intention like a plan on paper, but with instinct, habit, and care. And if you imagine the Longhouse at its deepest point of night, you can picture the benches as quiet lines of bodies wrapped in layered cloth and fur. Some turned inward, some turned outward, some breathing deep, some only half asleep, drifting between waking and rest. Because sleep here is not always perfect, and that's something that can soothe you too. In the past, many people experience segmented sleep, waking briefly in the night, then returning to rest, not in panic, not as a problem, just as a rhythm. So if you wake at night sometimes, you don't have to treat it like failure. You can treat it like a human thing, a natural thing. Now, let's slow the pace even more, and let's go through a very gentle night sequence in the Longhouse, not as timeline prompting, but as a soft set of scenes you can drift through. First, the settling. The movement slows. The last tasks of the evening come to an end. People stop speaking. The room becomes mostly sound and warmth. Second, the fire is arranged for endurance. Not bright, not dramatic, just stable. Ash is used. Coals are gathered. A slow-burning log is placed at the edge. Third, damp clothing is handled. Wet outer layers are removed where possible. Things are hung near warmth to dry slowly, because damp is dangerous. Damp makes cold sharper. Fourth, people layer themselves, not changing into delicate sleepwear, but rearranging what they already have. Wool tunics, cloaks, wraps, caps, socks, mitts, whatever is available, whatever holds heat. Fifth, the benches become full, blankets pulled up, skins spread, children tucked in, elders checked on. Somebody adjusts a curtain, somebody pulls a cloak over a shoulder. And then, the Longhouse becomes a single quiet creature, breathing, warming, waiting for morning. Now, let's stay with the sensory details again, because sensory details are gentle anchors for sleep. You notice the smell of wool, not perfumed wool, real wool, earthy, faintly animal, warmed by bodies. You notice the smell of smoke, not harsh, not choking, just present, a soft haze, a familiar winter scent that says, fire is here, warmth is here. You notice the sound of breath, not dramatic, just steady. Many breaths, overlapping, a calm chorus of sleep. You notice the fire's quiet conversation with the wood. Crack, settle, sigh, and then silence again. And far away, outside, the storm continues. But it can't reach you directly. It can only press on the roof and be in walls like a distant thought. Now, gently, let's speak about something that's easy to forget. The Longhouse is not meant to feel warm like a modern heated home. It is meant to feel not deadly. The goal is not comfort as we define it today. The goal is survivable warmth. Warm enough that fingers aren't useless all night. Warm enough that sleep can happen. Warm enough that the body doesn't spend the entire night fighting. And the reason people could sleep at all is because they combined methods. They stacked warmth. They layered warmth. They shared warmth. Fire, stones, roof, snow, walls, moss, straw, wool, skins, bodies, animals nearby, doors kept narrow, drafts blocked. This is Viking winter survival as a quiet design, not one trick, many small choices. Now, we can shift into another calm aspect of Viking home life. Night rituals. Not mystical rituals, just ordinary habits that make the night safer. Someone checks the hearth before sleep, not once, but habitually. Because fire is dangerous if ignored. Because a longhouse is mostly wood. Because ash can drift. Because embers can roll. So the fire is arranged carefully, contained, watched. Someone checks the animals, not as a dramatic event, just a glance, a listening moment. Because animals are valuable, because animals can be restless, because animals are a part of tomorrow's work. Someone checks on a child, pulls a blanket higher, tucks in a foot, a small touch, a quiet care. Then the longhouse becomes still again. And this is one of the reasons this makes such effective history for sleep. The story doesn't spike. It doesn't shock you awake. It stays in the same calm temperature. It remains a relaxing history you can let go of. Now, if your mind is still awake, we can gently add a few mild, boring explanations. The kind that feel like someone speaking softly in a dark room, not expecting you to respond. For example, the longhouse was often oriented and placed with environment in mind. Settlements didn't always have the luxury of perfect locations, but people learned to avoid the worst winds when possible. They learned where snow drifted. They learned where dampness collected. They learned how to use the land itself as protection. A slight rise, a sheltered hollow, a stand of trees that breaks wind. And inside, they learned that human warmth rises, smoke rises, heat rises. So they sleep higher than the floor. They hang storage up high. They build roofs that keep warmth from vanishing too quickly. They also learned that winter is not only cold, it's dark, so light matters. Firelight is the main light. Sometimes, a small oil lamp might appear, fed by animal fat or fish oil. A tiny, steady flame in a shallow dish, not everywhere, not always, but possible. These small lights would not make the longhouse bright. They would simply soften a corner, illuminate a hand, allow someone to see a face, allow someone to move without stepping on sleeping feet. But mostly the longhouse belongs to darkness, a comfortable darkness, a darkness that makes sleep easier, not harder. And the people here, ordinary people, did not fear darkness the way we sometimes do in modern life. They were used to it. The night was part of the year. It wasn't an emergency. It was a season. Now, we can gently bring the focus back to Viking clothing, because clothing is one of the biggest reasons they could sleep at all. Wool again. Always wool. Wool tunics. wool wraps, wool socks, wool caps, wool cloaks. Linen might exist as an underlayer when available, but wool does the heavy lifting. Wool traps heat. Wool resists cold. Wool continues to insulate even when damp. And if someone has been outside working, gathering wood, checking animals, moving supplies, their clothing may carry snow and dampness back inside. So part of the night routine is managing that dampness. Outer layers might be removed. A cloak may be hung near the fire. Boots may be placed where they will not freeze solid. Hands may be rubbed near warmth until sensation returns. Then people settle down again, wrapping themselves in what they have. Maybe a cloak doubled over. Maybe a spare tunic used like another blanket. Maybe furs placed over shoulders. And caps. Caps matter in cold. A lot of body heat escapes through the head, so caps are worn. Hoods, head wraps, anything that keeps warmth from floating away into the smoky air near the roof. Now, notice how all these details are not dramatic. They are repetitive, and repetition is soothing. Repetition is how you make winter survivable, and repetition is how you make a bedtime story calm. So we can let repetition happen again here. We can cycle through the warmth stack slowly, like counting something gentle, like listening to rain, fire, ash, stone, turf roof, snow blanket, thick walls, moss and gaps, raised benches, straw base, wool layers, first, shared warmth, quiet breath, and outside winter continues, but it is held back just enough. Let's move to a softer, slower drift section, the part of the script where your listener can truly begin to fall away without needing new information. Imagine you are lying on the bench now. Your body has found a position that works, maybe on your side, maybe on your back. The straw has shaped itself under you. The wool has warmed. The fur is soft against your shoulder. The hearth is not in your eyes. You don't need to look at it. You can feel it as a presence, a low orange glow somewhere beyond your closed eyelids. You hear the crackle, quiet, occasional. You hear the breathing, steady, layered. You hear the distant animal sound, soft, reassuring. You hear the storm, muted, harmless. And if you're still awake, you don't need to do anything about it. You don't need to force sleep. You can just be here. Now, in this in-between space, we can offer your mind something gentle to hold, a simple image that repeats. The ember glows, then dims, then glows again. The ember glows, then dims, then glows again. The fire breathes in its own slow way, and you can let your breath slow in response. In, in, very mild, boring detail about the Longhouse environment. Something that feels educational but not stimulating. In winter, ventilation is always a trade. Too open and you lose heat. Too closed and smoke builds up too much. So people balance. They live in balance. They adjust based on weather, based on wind direction, based on how the smoke behaves. If smoke hangs too low, eyes sting more. If smoke escapes too quickly, warmth disappears faster. So they learn slowly to accept a certain level of haze in exchange for heat. And in that haze, the Longhouse becomes a soft-edged space. Corners blur slightly. Firelight softens. Everything feels less sharp, which, in a way, is exactly what you want for sleep. Less sharp, less demanding, less bright. Now, as we continue, we'll begin to weave in more of the quiet sounds and objects of Viking daily life that would be present even at night. Things that are not exciting but grounding. A wooden bowl near a post, a cup, a tool tucked away, a coiled rope, a basket, a bundle of cloth. Simple things shaped by hands used daily, put away at night. These objects do not ask for attention. They simply exist. And that is calming too. A world that does not constantly ask you to react. Now, the Longhouse grows quieter again, as if the story itself is lowering its voice, as if the fire is settling, as if your mind is turning down its own volume. If you feel yourself drifting, that is perfect. If you lose a sentence, that is perfect. If your thoughts wander off and return, that is also perfect. Because this is a story to fall asleep to, and stories like this are meant to blur, they are meant to soften, they are meant to fade at the edges. Now, we can return one more time to the central question in the gentlest way. How did they do it? How did they stay warm? They stayed warm by keeping the hearth alive. They stayed warm by saving embers under ash. They stayed warm by heating stones and letting them cool slowly. They stayed warm with thick walls and turf roofs. They stayed warm by letting snow become a roof blanket. They stayed warm by blocking drafts with moss and careful building. They stayed warm by sleeping on raised benches above the coldest air. They stayed warm with straw bases and layered wool. They stayed warm with skins and furs. They stayed warm by sleeping close, sharing body heat. They stayed warm by keeping animals near enough to matter. None of it is magical. All of it is human. All of it is repeated. And that repetition can carry you now, like a slow rocking motion, like waves that don't crash, like snow that doesn't hurry. The Longhouse holds the warmth, just enough. The Longhouse holds the night, just enough. And you are allowed to rest, just enough. And then more. And then deeper. As we continue from here in the full script, we'll gradually move into the next major section, The deeper focus on architecture and insulation, then into beds and family warmth, then clothing and nighttime rituals, then animals and quiet longhouse sounds, all without rushing, all in the same calm temperature. But for this moment, you don't need to think ahead. You don't need to keep track. You don't need to hold the structure in your mind. You can simply lie still. You can let the longhouse keep doing its work. You can let the fire keep breathing. You can let the snow keep falling. You can let your thoughts become slower and softer. And if sleep comes now, you can let it. If sleep comes later, you can let it then. Either way, nothing is required of you. Nothing needs solving tonight. Only warmth, only quiet, only the slow passing of a winter night inside an icy Viking longhouse where ordinary people, night after night, found a way to be warm enough to sleep. The longhouse holds the warmth just enough. The longhouse holds the night just enough. And you are allowed to rest just enough, and then more, and then deeper. Now, if a part of your mind is still awake, still watching, still listening, we can give it something simple to do. Not work, not effort, just gentle noticing. Because the longhouse is full of small details, not exciting details, quiet ones. And quiet details are perfect for history for sleep. They give your thoughts somewhere soft to land. So let's take a slow walk through the space again, but even slower this time. And as we walk, we'll begin to notice how the building itself becomes a kind of blanket. How Viking houses were shaped for cold seasons, and how the longhouse turned Viking winter survival into ordinary routine. Imagine you are standing near the center, close enough to feel the faint warmth of the hearth, but far enough that you can look down the length of the long room. In firelight, everything is softened. Edges are less sharp. Objects look older, calmer, as if they belong to the night. The posts that support the roof rise like dark trees indoors. Between them, the shadows gather quietly. The air is smoky but not hostile. Just lived in. A gentle haze that makes the room feel like it's wrapped in its own atmosphere. You might notice how that haze holds warmth too. Not because smoke is warm in itself, but because the longhouse is built to let smoke leave slowly, and whatever leaves slowly takes warmth with it slowly. To a modern mind, this might seem strange. Why not let smoke out quickly? Why not make clean air? But winter makes you practical. Winter makes you choose what matters most. And for a family trying to sleep through the cold, warmth matters more than comfort in the modern sense. So the longhouse accepts a trade, a little smoke, for a room that doesn't freeze solid. And this trade becomes normal. It becomes part of Viking home life. The scent of smoke in hair and cloth. The slightly darkened roof beams, the way the firelight reflects through haze. Now let your gaze move down toward the floor. The floor is not polished wood like a modern home. It is packed earth, uneven, compacted by countless feet. In some places, you might see rough planks. In other places, you might see a mix. Earth near the edges and worn, firmer ground near the hearth where life happens most. Ash from many nights lies in thin layers, not because no one cleans, but because ash is always returning. Every fire makes more. And ash is not completely useless. Ash can be moved, shaped, spread. Ash can help insulate embers. Ash can soften the floor near the hearth. So ash is part of the environment, like snow outside, like wool on the benches, like the quiet breath of animals at the far end. Now, notice the benches along the walls again. They are raised, steady, simple, not smooth like furniture made for display. These are sleeping platforms made for function, made for bodies, made for nights. The benches hold layers: straw, rushes, dried grasses, wool blankets heavy and thick, animal skins that smell faintly of the creatures they once belonged to. And on these benches, bodies lie close. This is the heart of Viking sleeping arrangements. Not private rooms, not isolated beds, shared warmth, shared shelter, shared night. If you listen, you might hear the sound of wool shifting, a sleeper turning slightly, a blanket being pulled higher, a deep breath, then a calmer one. The Longhouse is not silent. It is quietly alive, like a forest at night when you stop expecting silence and start hearing the gentle work of living things. Now, let's gently step outside for a moment, not physically, not fully, but in imagination, just enough to feel the contrast again. Because the contrast explains so much about how Vikings stayed warm. Outside, the wind presses hard. It moves snow across the ground in thin sheets. It finds every exposed corner. It makes the air feel like it is biting. The sky is dark and heavy, not the kind of dark that feels romantic, the kind that feels endless, the kind that makes you grateful for shelter. And then, very gently, you return inside. The door closes again. The wind becomes muffled. The snow becomes distant. The world becomes smaller. And because it's smaller, it becomes manageable. This is one of the most calming truths about the Longhouse. It shrinks winter, not by defeating it, but by drawing a boundary and saying, winter can stay out there. We will rest in here. Now, with that feeling of boundary in mind, we can move into a deeper, mildly educational part of the story, still slow, still calm, about architecture and insulation, because this is the section where we explore the quiet intelligence of the building itself. When we say insulation, we often picture modern foam, modern panels, tight seals, but in the Viking Age, insulation was made of what the land provided: earth, turf, moss, wood, straw, wool. And the Longhouse uses these materials in layered ways. The walls might be timber frames. Between timbers, gaps are filled, sometimes with wattle and daub, woven sticks plastered with a clay mixture, sometimes with turf blocks, earth cut and stacked like heavy bricks, sometimes with stones at the base for stability. And then the gaps. Those tiny cracks that wind loves, those spaces that don't look important in daylight, but become important at midnight when the cold creeps in. Those gaps are filled with moss, with grasses, with whatever can be stuffed in and pressed down. Not elegant, not pretty, but effective. This is how Viking houses fought drafts. Not with perfection, but with persistence. The roof does the same layered work. First, structure, Beams, rafters, wooden supports, then a layer of brush or thatch, then turf on top, heavy earth that holds warmth and blocks wind. And in winter, snow piles on top of the turf. And snow, surprisingly, can help, because snow traps air, and trapped air resists heat loss. It slows it, it muffles it, it becomes another blanket. So on the coldest Viking Longhouse winter nights, a heavy snowfall can make the Longhouse feel quieter and slightly warmer. Not because snow is warm, but because snow is a barrier, a soft wall made of cold that blocks colder wind. Now, think about the shape of the Longhouse again. Long, not tall. This matters. Warm air rises. So if you build too high, warmth rises away from the people. It gathers where no one sleeps, no one eats, no one works. So the ceiling is kept lower, not suffocating, just practical. The warmth stays closer to bodies, the smoke stays closer too, and that smoke layer can actually create a warmer layer near the roofline. A trade-off that people tolerate because it helps them survive. And again, none of this is glamorous. It's just repeated experience, generations noticing what works, changing small things, keeping the best ideas. This is how Viking winter routine becomes architecture. Routine shapes wood, routine shapes turf. Routine shapes a roof line. Routine shapes where the door goes. Routine shapes where the benches sit. Now, let's talk about the door for a moment, because it matters more than you might think. A wide door is a wide invitation for wind. A narrow door is a controlled boundary. Many longhouses had narrow entrances. Sometimes there may have been an entry passage or a windbreak. Not everywhere, not always, but the idea appears again and again. Reduce drafts, control airflow, keep warmth inside as much as possible. And if the door opens at night, the cold rushes in. So doors are opened less at night. People move with caution. They do what they need to do, then close the boundary again. Now, return to the benches again, because architecture alone doesn't keep you warm enough to sleep. Architecture slows heat loss. But warmth is also created by bodies and materials. So this is where Viking beds matter. Straw is not just filler. Straw traps air. Air is insulation. So straw makes a difference. It keeps the cold wood from stealing warmth directly from the body. Then wool blankets. Wool is nearly perfect for cold climates. It holds warmth even when damp. It traps air in its fibers. It lasts. It's not delicate. It's honest fabric. Fabric that can be worked hard. Fabric that can be slept in. Then skins. Fur inward, hide outward. Fur adds softness. Hide adds wind resistance. And layered together, they create a pocket of warmth around a sleeper. And finally, other sleepers. Bodies, breath, heat. This is the most human part of Viking sleeping arrangements. The part that is not an object, not a building, but a social choice. A modern mind sometimes imagines that privacy is necessary for sleep, but in many cultures and many eras, shared sleep was normal. Not always comfortable by modern standards, but normal. And in winter, normal becomes helpful, because shared sleep means shared heat. So families sleep together, children tucked between adults, elders protected, guests offered a place, perhaps closer to warmth if they are honored, but still within the shared space. This is Viking home life at night, a community of sleepers in one room, held together by firelight and layered wool. Now, let's slow down even more and enter a gentle bed section, where we don't add too much new information. We just deepen the feeling of rest. Imagine you are lying on a bench now, your body heavy, your mind slowly loosening its grip on the day. So your cheek presses into wool. It is coarse but warm. It smells like smoke and fabric and time. Your blanket is pulled up to your shoulder. You can feel the weight of it settling over you. The fire is not bright. It is low. Its warmth is faint but real. It reaches you in pulses. As the embers glow, as the log catches, as the stones release their heat slowly. Somewhere nearby, someone breathes deeply. A long exhale, then another. The sound is not loud, but it is comforting, because it reminds you that you are not alone in the night. And outside the storm continues, but it is just sound now, just a distant hush, like a problem that can not reach you. Now, if you want to let the listener drift, this is where you can begin repeating quiet phrases, the kind that become a soft mantra without meaning too much. Warm enough, safe enough, quiet enough. Warm enough, safe enough, quiet enough. Now, let's gently move into the clothing and nighttime ritual section. Still calm, still slow. Because Viking clothing is one of the biggest reasons anyone could sleep in winter at all. In a modern home, we heat the air. In the Longhouse, you heat the body. You keep warmth close. You trap it. You layer it. You don't depend on the room being perfectly warm, because it won't be. So what do people wear at night? Not pajamas, not thin garments. They wear what works. They wear wool. They wear layers. A wool tunic might stay on. Linen underlayers may remain if they are dry. Hose on the legs. Thick socks. Foot wraps. Caps or hoods. Because heat escapes through the head. Because ears sting in cold. Because a cap can make the difference between comfort and misery. And damp clothing is handled carefully. Dampness is dangerous. It steals heat fast. So wet, outer layers might be removed. Cloaks hung near the fire. Boots placed where they won't freeze solid. Gloves or mitts warmed near embers. This is not a dramatic ritual. It is ordinary Viking daily life. A nightly routine that repeats so often it becomes invisible. Someone checks the fire. Someone checks the doorway. Someone checks the animals. Someone checks on a child. Then everyone settles again. And when they settle fully. There is nothing else to do in winter darkness. There is no late-night entertainment in the modern sense. There is only rest and waiting for morning. Now, if your listener is still awake, you can gently introduce the idea that waking briefly in the night was normal, because it helps modern insomniacs feel less broken. People may wake, shift position, add a log, pull a blanket higher, then return to sleep without panic, without shame. So, if you wake, you are not failing. You are just human, just like the sleepers in this longhouse. Now, let's move toward the far end of the longhouse where animals rest. because animals are part of warmth and sound, part of the atmosphere, part of the calm. You hear a cow exhale, slow and deep. You hear straw shift under a hoof. You hear a sheep breathe. You hear a horse stamp once, then settle again. These sounds are not interruptions. They are part of the lullaby of the Longhouse. They are steady, natural, threatening. And the warmth from animals, quiet warmth, adds to the room. Not enough to make it cozy like a modern heated bedroom, but enough to matter, enough to tip the balance towards survivable. This is how Viking winter survival works. Many small warmth sources together: fire, bodies, animals, insulation, layers, routine. Now we can move into a gentle, repetitive sound section, the part designed to let people fall asleep fully. This is where you slow the narration even more and let long as do the work. The fire crackles softly. A log settles. Someone exhales. A cow breathes. Snow presses on the roof. The wind moves past the walls. Inside, the Longhouse remains. The fire crackles softly. A log settles. Someone exhales. A blanket shifts. Then stillness returns. And if your listener is still awake, you can reassure them again, softly, kindly, without making it a big moment. If you are still awake, you don't need to do anything. You can simply listen, or you can let the words fade. Either is fine. Now, let's begin a slow, final stretch of the night. Not ending the story yet, but moving deeper into the sense that time is passing gently. Inside, time is not measured in minutes. It's measured in warmth, in the glow of embers, in the cooling of stones, in the quietening of breath. The fire grows smaller, but not gone. The room grows darker, but not frightening. It grows quieter, but not empty. This is the deepest part of the night, when the world outside feels very far away, when the Longhouse feels like its own universe: wood, straw, wool, breath, ember. And the longer you stay in this quiet universe, the more your own mind begins to match it. Thoughts slow, edges soften, concerns become distant. Now we can return once more to the core phrase, the one your video is built around. But we'll say it like a whisper, like an answer that doesn't need emphasis. This is how Vikings stayed warm sleeping in longhouses, not with perfection, not with luxury, with many small choices, with patience, with layers, with routine, with shared warmth. And tonight, in this sleepy narration, you are allowed to borrow that routine, borrow that shelter, borrow that calm. You don't have to be strong tonight. You don't have to be productive tonight. You don't have to solve anything. You can simply rest as the Longhouse holds back the winter, just enough for sleep to arrive. Now, we'll linger here a little longer, in the soft repetition, because repetition is the doorway to deeper sleep. The ember glows, then dims, then glows again. The ember glows, then dims, then glows again. A breath in, a breath out. A breath in, a breath out. The storm outside continues, but it cannot reach you. The storm outside continues, but it cannot reach you. The longhouse remains, the fire remains, the sleepers remain. And you can drift as slowly as you need into quiet, into warmth, into rest. And you can drift as long as you need to quiet, to warmth, to rest. Forward will stay in your house. Let the night keep unfolding the same as it has. Slowly, softly, without any sharp turns. If your mind is still awake, it can keep doing what it does best. Not solving, not planning, just noticing. Because there are still small details in this room, and small details, repeated gently, make the best sleep aid storytelling. So picture the longhouse again. Long, low, and dim. The Viking fire hearth glowing in the center, the benches lining the walls, the animals farther down in the shadows, the roof overhead thick with turf, softened by snow. And most of all, the feeling that you are inside a boundary, inside a shelter, inside a space that's doing one simple job, holding back winter, just enough. Now, there's something else about these nights that's easy to forget if you've grown up with electric light. When it's truly dark outside and the sky stays dark for long hours, you don't fight it the same way. You don't try to keep going at full speed. You slow down because the world itself slows down. And that is one reason a Viking winter sleep story can feel so calming. Because the whole environment supports rest. The night isn't a leftover space after the day. The night is the main event for many hours. The night is where you recover. In Viking daily life, winter changes priorities. It changes how you move. It changes what you store. It changes how you plan. It changes what matters. In summer, there is light and work. In winter, there is less light and more waiting. So the longhouse becomes the center of life, and the hearth becomes the center of the longhouse, and warmth becomes the center of the hearth. Now, let's return gently to the idea of warmth again. Because warmth here is not one thing, it's layers. And layers are soothing because they are predictable. There is the warmth of the fire, soft, pulsing, low. There is the warmth of stones, slow, steady, patient. There is the warmth of wool, trapped air, held close. There is the warmth of bodies, shared, quiet, natural. And there is even the warmth of the building itself. The way thick walls and a turf roof slow the loss of heat, so the inside stays less cold. Less cold becomes a kind of comfort, not flashy comfort, just enough. Now, if you want, you can imagine the night moving deeper, not in a timeline sense, but in a feeling sense. The way the room seems to sink slightly into stillness as everyone's breathing becomes slower. A child curls closer to an adult. Someone turns and pulls a blanket higher. A cap is adjusted over an ear. Then everything settles again. The fire makes a small sound, a soft crack, as a piece of wood collapses inward. A tiny spark rises, then disappears, ash drifts down quietly. And the longhouse returns to the same calm rhythm, breath, ember, breath, ember. Now let's bring in a gentle, boring explanation again, something mildly educational that won't wake anyone up. One reason wool was so important in the North is that it remains insulating even when it's a little damp. Unlike some materials that lose warmth quickly when wet, wool holds on. Its fibers trap air, and trapped air holds heat. So Viking clothing, wool tunics, cloaks, socks, caps, is part of the bedtime system. It's not only daytime protection, it's nighttime survival. And because winter work can leave you damp, snow on your cloak, sweat under your layers, a careful person learns to manage moisture, not with machines, with habit, with patience, with positioning near the fire. Clothes are hung where rising warmth can dry them slowly. Not too close. No one wants cloth to burn, but close enough that dampness leaves the fabric instead of freezing in it overnight. And that slow drying becomes part of the longhouse atmosphere. It adds to the smell. Smoke, wool, damp turning to dry. It adds to the softness of the room. Hanging garments break drafts. They create small pockets of sheltered air. Now, if you look upward again, you might notice how the roof beams disappear into shadow. The smoke haze makes the highest parts of the room feel distant. Not scary, just indistinct, as if the longhouse has layers of night inside it. And in those rafters, things may be stored, not because it's beautiful storage, but because it's practical. High places stay drier. High places are harder for small animals to reach. High places keep important things out of the way. Bundles of herbs dried from summer. Tools that won't be used until morning. A coil of rope. A bag of grain. Strips of meat hung where smoke can touch them. All of these things are quiet reminders that the longhouse holds more than sleepers. It holds the household. It holds the year. It holds Viking home life in every season, but especially in winter, when the outside world becomes harsh. Now we can shift gently to another calming truth: the way sound behaves inside a longhouse. Wood absorbs some sound. Wool absorbs sound. Straw absorbs sound. The smoke haze even seems to soften sound, as if the air itself is thick enough to slow noise. So the longhouse becomes a muffled place, not silent, just softened. Voices don't carry sharply. Footsteps are dull. Even the storm outside becomes a hush. This muffling is part of what makes it feel safe, because sharp sound can keep you awake, but soft sound can become a lullaby. The crackling of the fire, the faint shifting of straw, the slow breathing of animals, the distant wind. If this were a slow history podcast playing in the background, you could almost forget the modern world exists. You could just let the room's rhythm become your rhythm. Now, we'll linger here with a slow repetition, because repetition is the simplest way to help the mind drift. The fire crackles softly. A breath in. A breath out. The roof holds snow. The walls hold wind back. The bench holds sleepers. The wool holds warmth close. Again. The fire crackles softly. A breath in. A breath out. The storm continues outside. But it cannot reach you. Now, there is something else that can be helpful for insomniac minds. A gentle reminder that even in the past, people didn't always sleep like a perfect modern fantasy. They might wake briefly, turn over, adjust a blanket, listen to the wind, then drift back down. If someone is responsible for the fire, they may wake once to check it, or they may simply sleep close enough to feel if it changes. No panic, no judgment, just the night behaving like a night. And you can allow your night to behave like that too. If you're awake, you're awake. If you drift, you drift. Nothing needs to be forced. Now, let's gently move into a more detailed sleeping arrangements section, because this is what people came here for in a way, to understand the feeling of sleeping in a Viking longhouse. The benches are shared, but shared doesn't always mean chaotic. People have places, the same spots night after night, the same familiar dips in straw, the same worn areas on blankets. Children may sleep between parents or caregivers, not because it's sentimental, but because it's warm and safe. Elders might sleep where drafts are less likely, or where they are easiest to check on, or where the bench is most stable. Guests might be placed closer to the fire, a sign of respect, or placed where there is space and warmth enough. And if there are privacy curtains, they are not for luxury, they are for wind, for drafts, for small boundaries inside a shared room. A curtain interrupts airflow, a curtain holds warmth closer. A curtain turns a bench into a sheltered pocket. And those small pockets matter, because when the longhouse is only warm enough, every small improvement feels valuable. Now imagine the feeling of the blanket over your shoulders, not a light blanket, a heavy one. the kind that presses warmth in, the kind that makes your body feel anchored. Imagine the wool against your skin, a little rough, but not unpleasant. The roughness fades as you relax. Your body stops evaluating, it just accepts. Imagine the straw under you. It shifts slightly as you settle, then it becomes still. And somewhere beyond your eyelids, the fire glows quietly, not asking you to watch it, just existing. Now, we'll gently move back to architecture again. Not because we need more facts, but because facts can be soothing when they're slow and non-urgent. Some longhouse walls were built with timber frames and planks. Some were built with turf. Some had stone footings. Different regions used different materials based on what was available. But the goal was similar. Block wind, slow heat loss, create shelter. The roof was often the most complex part. It had to hold weight, turf, snow, storms. It had to shed rain. It had to last. And it had to do all of this without modern nails and modern materials. So longhouse building was skilled work. Not flashy skilled work, but skilled in the way that keeps families alive. And over generations, builders learned small refinements, how to angle the roof, how to layer the turf, how to reinforce beams, how to seal gaps, how to create vents that let smoke out without inviting too much cold in. We can't know every detail perfectly. Archaeology gives us foundations, post holes, remains. Reconstruction gives us likely forms. But the exact feel of every longhouse, the exact size of every vent, the exact way smoke moved on a particular night, those are partly lost. And that uncertainty can be soothing too, because it means you don't have to hold a perfect picture. You only need a gentle one, a believable one, a calm one. Now, we can let the uncertainty settle like snow, soft and harmless, nothing to solve, nothing to prove. Because tonight is not about getting every measurement right. Tonight is about letting your mind rest inside the idea of shelter. Now, let's shift into night rituals again. Simple acts that help the longhouse move into deeper quiet. Might bank the fire, pulling embers together, placing a slow burning log at the edge, covering coals with ash so they survive. Someone might make sure water is stored where it won't freeze solid, or where it can be thawed more easily in the morning. Someone might check that tools are put away, not because tools will run away, but because order makes morning easier. Someone might speak a few quiet words, not a grand speech, just a small exchange. Then silence returns. And gradually, the room becomes all about sleep, breath, warmth, stillness. Now, because this is boring history for sleep, we can slowly describe the longhouse sounds again, but with slightly different angles, so the repetition feels natural. A faint creak from a roof beam as wind presses outside. The subtle settling of turf and snow on the roof. A distant animal shifting weight. A soft clink as a piece of wood collapses in the hearth. A tiny hiss as a damp edge of a log dries near the coals. A long exhale from someone asleep. Then nothing, then calm again, Now imagine the storm outside continuing its own slow work. Snow falls, wind moves it, drifts build. The world reshapes itself quietly. But inside, the Longhouse remains stable. It is built for this. It has held winter before. It will hold winter again. And that stability is part of what your nervous system can borrow. Because the body likes stability. The body relaxes when the environment feels predictable. Now, if your mind tries to pull you back to modern life, you can do the same gentle thing we did earlier. Place those thoughts outside the Longhouse door. Imagine setting them near the entrance. Your plans, your worries, your conversations, your lists. They can wait there like boots waiting for morning. Inside, you don't have to carry them. Inside, you only have to breathe. Now, let's create a slow, cozy winter mini loop. A loop you can repeat in your recording to stretch time without feeling stretched. I'll write it as if you're speaking softly over fireplace ambience. The fire is low, but it is alive. The stones are warm, but not hot. The blankets are heavy, and they hold the warmth close. The roof is thick, and snow makes it thicker. The walls are strong, and the wind stays outside. The Longhouse is quiet, and the night moves slowly. Again, the fire is low, but it is alive. The stones are warm, but not hot. The blankets are heavy, and they hold the warmth close. Now, we can gently move toward the animals, food, and quiet sounds atmosphere again, because that's one of the most soothing sections for sleep. Food stores are quiet at night. They don't sparkle. They don't call attention. They simply exist. Dried fish, cured meat, grain, maybe dairy products in season. And there is something calming about stored food, because stored food is security. Stored food is planning. Stored food means tomorrow is possible. In winter, that matters, because winter can be long, and the mind relaxes when it senses preparation. Now, listen to the animals again. A cow exhales, a sheep shifts, a horse sighs. These are deep, steady sounds. They don't carry urgency, they carry calm, and their warmth, quiet warmth, adds to the room, not like a heater, like a gentle baseline, a steady living presence. This is part of Viking home life that is easy to romanticize, but here we'll keep it simple. Animals were valuable, and in winter, keeping them safe and nearby helped everyone. Now, let's soften further, as if the story itself is beginning to fall asleep. The sentences can become slower, the S can become longer, the details can become simpler. Because at this point, your listener doesn't need more information. They need more calm. So we will let calm expand. The embers glow. The embers dim. The embers glow again. A breath in, a breath out. A blanket shifts. Then stillness returns. Now imagine the far-off idea of morning. Not morning itself, just the knowledge that morning will come eventually. But it doesn't matter when, because you are not required to meet it yet. In the Longhouse, morning will arrive in its own time. Someone will wake first. Someone will stir the coals. Someone will bring the hearth back to life. Light will creep in slowly, but that is later. Right now, the Longhouse belongs to night, and night belongs to rest. Now we can bring in one more gentle reassurance. Soft, direct to insomniac, but not too emotional. If you are still awake, you don't have to be, but you also don't have to fight it. You can simply rest here in the in-between. Rest is still rest, even before sleep fully arrives. You are doing enough by lying still, by breathing, by letting your body settle. Now, we can shift into a longer drift passage that intentionally repeats phrases, because repetition is what makes a 2-hour sleep story work smoothly. The Longhouse is warm enough. The Longhouse is quiet enough. The Longhouse is safe enough. The fire is low enough to last. The ash is soft enough to protect embers. The stones are warm enough to release heat slowly. The blankets are thick enough to trap warmth. The wool is steady enough to keep heat close. The furs are heavy enough to press warmth inward. The sleepers are close enough to share warmth. The animals are near enough to add their quiet presence. And outside, the storm is far enough away. Outside, the storm is far enough away. Now, if you want to keep the narration steady and hypnotic, you can cycle through the core keywords very naturally, not as tags, but as gentle reaffirmations of what this story is. This is a Viking winter night. This is a Viking longhouse. This is Viking daily life, slow and ordinary. This is Viking home life, shared shelter and quiet routines. This is a Viking fire hearth keeping embers alive. This is Viking clothing, wool layers and caps. This is Viking sleeping arrangements, benches, blankets, bodies close. This is Viking beds, straw, wool, furs. This is how Vikings stayed warm, not one trick, but many small choices. And because it's ordinary, because it's repetitive, because nothing dramatic happens, it becomes perfect bedtime history. Perfect history for sleep. Perfect boring history for sleep. Now, let's return to the fire again, but in an even simpler way. No explanations, just presence. The hearth glows. The hearth settles. The hearth remains. And if you imagine yourself watching it with half-closed eyes, you might see the firelight pulsing gently, not bright enough to wake you, just bright enough to reassure the oldest part of your mind. Warmth is still here. Now, another soft detail. The way people position themselves on the bench. Those closest to the hearth may lie with their backs to the room, or facing inward, or facing the wall, depending on habit and comfort. Some might wear a cloak like a blanket. Some might fold cloth under the head like a pillow. Some might tuck extra fabric around the feet, because feet cool faster. And over time, as the longhouse becomes quieter, everyone's movements become smaller. A shift becomes a whisper, a rustle becomes a breath. Then stillness returns. Now, imagine the deep night again, the time when the fire is lowest and the room is darkest and the roof feels most like a heavy blanket overhead. This is the time when you feel most sheltered, because outside is at its coldest and inside is doing its best. Not perfect, but enough. Now, we can begin to nudge the script closer to the eventual closing mood. The dying fire, calm, without actually ending yet, just a gradual shift. The flames are smaller now, not gone, just reduced to embers with occasional flickers. The stones are still warm, but cooling slowly. The air is still sheltered, but cooler near the floor. The benches are still warmer than the ground, and the blankets are still holding heat close. The longhouse is mostly breath now, and the occasional tiny sound of fire. If you have been awake for a while, you may notice your thoughts are less sharp than before, less urgent, less loud. That is the longhouse working on you, the same way it worked on its own people. It slows you down. It softens you. It makes you feel held. Now for a final long drift loop in this segment, a loop you can read very slowly with long N to add time naturally. We'll describe the same calm scene from a few gentle angles. The snow on the roof is heavy and quiet. The wind outside keeps moving, but it is only a distant sound. Inside, the air is smoky and still. The hearth is low and alive. The stones are warm and patient. The benches are lined with straw and wool. The sleepers are wrapped in layers. Children are tucked in close. Elders rest where warmth is steady. Animals breathe in the shadows, and the night continues. Slowly, softly, without urgency. Again, the snow on the roof is heavy and quiet. The wind outside keeps moving, but it is only a distant sound. Inside, the air is smoky and still. The hearth is low and alive. And you are safe and have enough to rest. Now,
If sleep has not arrived yet, that's fine. We don't chase sleep here. We invite it gently. We make space for it. And we let it come when it's ready. Because tonight, you don't have to solve anything. You don't have to fix your day. You don't have to replay every conversation. You can let it all wait while you spend a long, unhurried winter night inside a Viking Longhouse, listening to a quiet world where ordinary people learned slowly and practically
How Vikings stayed warm and how they slept through another cold, dark season. And now we remain here in the warmth, in the hush, in the slow, steady rhythm, until your mind finally decides it has heard enough and lets go. The embers are smaller now, and the longhouse is almost entirely breath and stillness. Outside, the storm keeps moving, but it feels far away, like it belongs to another world. Inside, the turf roof holds steady, the wool holds warmth close, and the last glow of the Viking fire hearth fades into ash. If you're still awake, you don't need to do anything at all. Just rest here, in this Viking winter shelter, where how Vikings stayed warm was never about perfection.